Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the Corner series where we will discuss the latest scientific discoveries, technological advances, and what is around the corner and what is about to come in advanced material innovation and paradigm shift. Today with me, I have our wonderful guest, Dr. Vincent Bouchiat, who is a CEO of Grapheal, and I am very excited. I've been following this company in the past few months, and I'm really excited to hear more about it. Vincent, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Zina. How are you?
Good, good. How's it going in France? Where are you located right now?
Yeah, so I'm in South France, in Grenoble, in the Alps, in the mountains.
In the Alps. Okay, well that sounds quite fun. Now, how is the weather?
Very nice, very hot today, 30 degrees Celsius. Yeah.
Well, great to have you on board, Vincent. As I mentioned, I've been kind of following the company in the past few months with the fascinating work that you guys have been doing. And I'm really interested to actually know the person behind this company. I want to learn more about you. Who is Vincent? What is the story?
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur, which recently actually left my previous job from academia. And I decided to quit my professor position to really create this company, incorporate. So it has been a very long journey, and it took me 5 years to take the decision to leave my position, close my lab, and create this company. So yeah, I'm actually having an academic background. I'm coming from a family of scientists. 6 of my closest family members, my sister, my father, and uncle are all university professors. So
Wow.
it's really something
That's quite a pedigree.
we really have in the family. And I did the same, actually. I did my study in Paris in a school of physics, which was at that time directed by Pierre-Gilles de Gennes, who was a prominent scientist at that time, Nobel Prize winner when I was there. I learned the taste of scientific experimentation, about doing experiments, practical experiments. And also what was very interesting there, Pierre-Gilles de Gennes was a very strong advocate of interdisciplinary research, taking concepts from one field, for example, a transition phase in physics, and apply it to biology or to soft materials, for example. So I cherish the idea of taking concept from one field and applying to the other, and trying to put together different fields of physics and other field of science.
That is quite fascinating. And you've had a trajectory from academia, and you've had quite a career in research. And then you stepped out and you became an entrepreneur and a tech startup owner. What was that transition like? And when I made that transition from academia to industry, for me, in the morning when I woke up, the feel was different. And I just want to know your experience. What was your experience like? And how does it feel waking up in the morning these days?
Yeah, so it's indeed a very different job. It's actually, I had to change the way I'd like to drop a bit the curiosity and stay more focused. I do more networking than I used to be, because in academia you can survive just being, in your lab doing nice science and write papers, sometimes going to conference. But in entrepreneurship, it's a completely different way. If you want to make the job running, you have to focus on the cash flow. You have to anticipate. You have to deliver things on time. The time is shorter also, and so it's very different indeed.
And
Yeah, so it's something I wanted to try for a long time. It's a kind of midlife crisis, I would say. Some people buy a sports car. Me, I try to
start a company.
taste different things.
What does it feel like when you wake up in the morning? How is your routine different? Do you work harder or
Yes,
less?
I do actually. I was enjoying a very comfortable life as a professor, because my lab was running smoothly. I got a group of research, but it was a bit monotonous, and I got more of the same every year. And I didn't wanted to see myself getting old in this, even though academic is full of surprise, of discoveries, but the time was flowing too slowly for me.
Tell us about the company. What is the concept of this company that made you jump from academia to this world of entrepreneurship, the unknown of the entrepreneurship and startups? What is the concept?
Yeah, so it's indeed when I was talking about interdisciplinary research, and it's something exactly what I wanted to try in this company. So you see, I'm coming from a nanotechnology field. I was studying quantum transport in nanoscale materials, and especially I was focusing on very low temperature studies on quantum effect and superconductivity plus quantum confinement. So a very different field of research. But for that, I was obliged to really make very clean and well-controlled materials. And especially, I get interested in the synthesis of graphene, so the carbon nanoscale device. It happened to me that I decided to make a very clean graphene and transfer on insulating materials for these studies. And then little by little, I came interested in the way of producing graphene on other material like plastics. And I discovered also the beauty of graphene for interfacing with many material, making what we call hybrid device when we couple graphene with superconductors, but also with any kind of material like living entities, like living cells. Yes. And I had the intuition that graphene was very well suited to interface with living cells. Because, you know, graphene is sitting at the interface between organic and inorganic materials. So it's a conductor like metal. It's a semiconductor. We're capable of sensing charge and make a very nice sensor, but also it's at the border with organic element. So you can graft element on it, you can do organic chemistry with it, and you can couple very nicely with soft materials. You know, the binding energy of graphene is the same as a cell, biological cells. So it's interfaced very nicely. And I had the intuition it was also a way to probe them. So we went to make a living culture of neurons on graphene, and it was a good success. We got the signal of the activity of the neurons, of the electrical signals, but also it happened that we saw that there was stimulation of the growth. And so I got the idea that it could be a nice biocompatible material to interface with cells, but also with wounds. And so that's the name of the company. Grapheal is a portmanteau word, a combination of graphene and healing. And the idea is to better treat wounds and to interface with skin elements.
That's
it's a very long travel because I came from basic science, quantum, condensed matter, to medicine, and from academia to entrepreneurship. So it's a long journey. It took me 5 years, actually.
So actually, this is fascinating to me because for a very short period of time, I actually worked on a project. We were providing the graphene interface, and we're working with a group of neurologists that were actually culturing neurons on graphene, and they were saying, "Oh, these neurons look very happy on this," and we were all very fast. It is fascinating to me because I did not know a single thing about biology. I still don't. I call them the science of squishy stuff. I don't understand. So I am actually fascinated that how did you transition into this biological side of it? Was it a part of the research you were doing before, or was this something that you actually had to add on to your library of knowledge?
Yeah, actually, I was not at all expert in biology. I got very few elements of knowledge about that, but I had a good collaboration. And also, I learned some parts. I also discussed with medical doctors. And we did some preliminary experiment, and then little by little we came to the idea that it was a nice material to make connected bandage, and the idea of having at the same time therapeutics and diagnostic to check if the wound is healing or if the wound is getting infected is something quite important for some types of wounds, especially for diabetic people. So at the end, we found our market because, you know, doing a company is also trying to make a product, but not only a product, but finding the market. And so finding the market was most difficult because of graphene. It's not so easy to find a place where the market is happy to accept it. So it's still not fully sure, but we have a good track on that.
It is a very fascinating product. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it does? Wound healing. Tell me more about it. Are you guys actually monitoring how the wound is healing, and also perhaps providing a platform where it actually heals better?
Correct. This is exactly that. First, it seems to be not so important. Actually, it is, because there is a silent epidemics that very little people are actually aware of, is what we call chronic wounds. So it's all the wounds that takes more than 6 weeks to heal. And they affect two population on the rise, diabetics and elderly people. So for diabetics, maybe you know that on the foot, when they get a wound, it's not healing at all. Sometimes it can actually become deeper and deeper and touch the bone. And when the bone is exposed, as you know, there is a high risk of nasty infection. And it's end up sometimes with amputation. So it's 500,000 amputation per year. And so we came to the idea that most of these amputations are not, could be avoided. And actually, if you know more about the history of the wounds, and if you can detect at early stage the onset of an infection, then by a better monitoring, you can really avoid going to this dramatic consequence.
How do you guys monitor this? How do you monitor? Tell us a little bit about the science part of it as well.
Yeah, so wound healing is a very complex field, actually, because healing is a succession of a lot of steps about the inflammation period, the reconstruction, and the scar production. So this is quite a complex field with a lot of biomarkers expressing the protein, are expressing one after the others. So following this procedure and knowing at which step the wound is stopped healing and what is to do to trigger healing is something that requires a lot of knowledge. And there is a lack of expertise in many ways. So having a tool to provide this additional expertise is something that many caregivers, many nurses are actually willing to have. So this smart bandage technology is, on its way. Many people, many companies are trying to make it. And we are betting that maybe graphene is the good material to make it happen at low cost and good quality.
That is such a great application, and using the unique value proposition of a material like graphene for these processes. Tell us a little bit. I know you and I have been talking about this transition of what you and the company has been doing to now in the COVID space. And and we are very lucky to have you as a part of the France chapter of the Advanced Material Pandemic Taskforce, which is this nonprofit public interest initiative that we started, which has now 13 country chapters and 5 working groups that are working on how do we create a roadmap to look at how advanced materials can solve some of humanity's most immediate challenges, such as this public health emergency that we have on our hand. So tell us a little bit about how you guys have actually kind of dived into this other field of COVID and diagnostics.
Yes, so of course, in France, like in many other countries, we've been affected by the pandemics. I had to stop working. I had to actually close my headquarters of the company because we are hosted by a public laboratories. So that was a big disruption. And during that time, it was also a good time to take some perspectives and think about our impact, about the way we could help alleviating all the disruption and trying to find solutions. And so what we realized is that graphene is doing very nice biosensors. Basically, you can probe very tiny change of charge and transfer this change of charge in some electrical conductance. And so if you put antibodies on the surface of graphene targeting the virus, then you can probe tiny amount of virus, for example, in the saliva. So by taking 80% of the technology of the bandage I was producing and retrofit this in some sensor, a portable point-of-care sensor, we believe that we can produce a disposable diagnostic test, which could be useful to screen people rapidly. Because what is very special with graphene is that you digitize the information of the biochemical recognition between the antibodies and the virus directly on the sensor itself.
So you make a
signal, electronic signal, directly on the graphene at the sensor level. So then you can make, you see a diagnostic, which is instead of having a change of colors or some kind of optical signal, fluorescence, whatever, you have a signal which is directly electronic. You can store safely, you can transmit to a trusted party, for example. And this, you can do that with just €1 chip. And so that's something really I want to try to see if we can push this prototype to the market. Time is very short. I don't know if graphene is mature enough to make this working in, let's say, the time frame to produce massively this sensor, but we're going to try.
So you're telling us that you can not only detect and diagnose, but also you can actually digitize that information in a very fast process and be able to transmit that. And you were telling me about something with the passports, right? So the immunity passports. Tell us a little bit about how this connects to that immunity passport.
Yeah, so since you have a way to probe the virus on a simple way and cheap way, so you can think about storing this on a disposable element of a single-use element like a tag. So we could use this tag as a way to, for example, use it for granting access, let's say, to an airport, to a boarding area, to a nurse house, or whatever, to a public place. So the idea of having this tag and an access code is something quite appealing, and I think a good characteristic which you can actually associate with graphene, because there are not so many sensors you can make disposable which can be interfaced with electronics so easily.
What are the challenges of bringing that idea and this great science behind this to the market? What are the hurdles for companies such as yourself right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because it's quite intimidating to have, a very small startup and saying, okay, I know I want to produce millions of tests. So we are discussing with a lot of partners to see if we can wrap up this technology fast, and what are the way, what is the cost to do that, is it worthwhile or not? So yeah, we need help from very big players in the test of the diagnosis test, like, to ramp up this and make it to the market, certify the solution, make it reliable enough to produce massive amounts with reproducible results. So it's still not sure we can get through, but we are working on that.
Name 3 of the challenges you have, and our listeners, maybe they have a connection, maybe they're in this field. Name 3 of the challenges that you're facing right now that if you could solve, this would expedite and fast track the process much, much faster.
Yeah, so we have the challenge of producing graphene with constant quality and low cost. So we have a pilot line in our lab, but if we want to do this test, we need to have high quality, large mobility graphene on plastics. So we have a process that in principle is compatible with roll-to-roll, but we have to deploy it with the quality needed to make this sensor reproducible. Another big challenge is to connect graphene with plastic electronics on the board and make this available, and low cost, because basically it has to be a few euro everything. And the last one is to make this solution certified in a small amount of time, and with the the quality to make it safe, but also with a low threshold of detection, a low ratio of false negatives, and as much as you can, because that's the big problem with today's diagnostic tests, is that they are not so reliable and it takes time to give their result.
If we could use the AMPT network and the task force that we've created just for this purpose to identify these wonderful ideas and be able to come together as a community to provide the resources to nurture these, how can we mobilize this task force to help a company such as yourself?
Yeah, so I need players in the diagnostics tests and plastic electronics partners to really help me to scale up this. So that would be, I think, the partners. One in plastic electronics, flexible electronics, and another in more in the biotech field.
Do you guys have any need of more of a venture capital or investment in this?
So
you forgot that one. That should have been the fourth one, right?
Yes, of course. I'm in the middle of my first seed round, fundraising round, actually. So yeah, of course, this is some very, very important issues as a startup, of course. But I would say that's something that we all encounter, but delivering on time is even more difficult, I would say, than raising money these days. And execution for a startup is the key. You see, I would say I'm more worried about that, having deliver on time what we propose, than just raising money.
Vincent, this COVID situation and this pandemic is really changing our lives. I mean, look at the progression of your company. Now you are actually dedicating your time and your resources on developing an application in this area. And this is just one of the examples of how it is impacting our lives, right? Many of us retrofitting the businesses that we have, many of the labs that we have are actually going to look into some of the areas of research that they were not even looking into before. How is COVID and this pandemic changing our world? And I want you to actually take off your scientist hat and your professional hat and put on the hat of an astute observer and tell us, what are you seeing in France? What are you seeing in terms of the trends that is setting in the post-COVID world? How has it changed us as human beings? How is it changing the different segments of society, different industries, and different consumer trends?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. We see a lot of change. So in France, we had a lot of, social unrest this last year, not directly associated to the COVID-19. Of course, it was previous time. But I think the COVID is just making things even more acute. So first we have, in many Western countries, what we call a digital gap, which is basically there is a gap between people internet savvy that can embrace the digital transformation and many others that are left by the side of the road.
Interesting.
And this creates a lot of frustration in democracies. And actually, it's threatening the democracy. Also, we have the global warming, which is, I think, even more concerning than the COVID crisis, and the loss of biodiversity, because this is much more irreversible. And so all this, we make the feeling that we are all together in a ship, but it's on the verge of sinking. And we have, of course, the globalization that makes this even more acute. And of course, the COVID-19 crisis is a consequence of this globalization. But this pandemic is the global manifestation of all this. And it also makes a real crash test for our democracies. So I think it's just one of the big events we're going to face in all these non-connected events, but that connect in our daily lives.
That's a great point. And as a result of this, how do you see our consumer trends and are some of our industrial segments changing? For example, we're seeing this social distancing. We're seeing that the retrofitting of office spaces, where perhaps it would have an impact on automotive industry because people might not be necessarily going to work or travel as much. How do you see this ripple effect, and where do you think perhaps materials like graphene, or as a whole the family of advanced materials, those materials, the novel materials we can actually engineer to add value, how do you think those are going to be fitting, not just in diagnostic, not just in PPE, not just in antiviral, but how are they going to be fitting in this whole host of innovation needs that is going to be opening up as a result of this change in behavioral societal changes that is coming?
Yes, so you see, one of the aspects of my product is to use graphene to make a disposable sensor. So a sensor that you can use for 2-3 days and just put on the trash without creating too much carbon impact and too much pollution, because basically the sensor is pure carbon on a thin plastic film. So the impact in principle should be much lower than a real sensor that you have to clean or to change with the risk of pathogens. So it's really opened the way of making remote patient monitoring. And this is what it's about, because, you know, with the pandemics, we saw, especially in France, the emergence of telemedicine. And the problem of telemedicine is that there is a lack of information because the patient is remotely. So having sensors is really the answer of this situation. So I think this kind of sensor can really boost and make precision tools for telemedicine. And of course, we saw that emerging fast in the era of this new pandemics.
That is a great point, especially in telemedicine. Sometimes what it translates into in most cases right now is that, well, you only see your doctor and you're talking to your doctor. We don't have sensors at home where we would be able to do some of those diagnostics that will be kind of enabling the doctor to do the work that they usually do. So that is a very good point, and that's probably a progression of, as a result of this COVID, a new field that is going to be emerging very, very fast, and our materials can actually fit into that scheme very, very nicely. Well, thank you so much for your time, but before I actually let you go, I have one more question for you. What are you cooking tonight?
So my answer will be very cliche. So what we are cooking tonight is actually ratatouille. So ratatouille is
that's fantastic.
It's a typical summer dish actually in all South Europe. And so actually we got very nice eggplants and tomatoes these days because they are fully ripe. We got, and they're also super cheap because we got a very nice sunny weather during the lockdown period. And so we have very nice vegetables these days, and very cheap actually.
What goes into it? So eggplants, zucchini, tomatoes, what else goes into ratatouille?
Zucchini and olive oils, some garlics, of course, and fine herbs like
any cheese,
rosemary, a bit of cheese sometimes, on top on the dish.
Well, that actually is making me hungry right now. Although this is right now, it is a kind of a lunchtime for me. It's probably dinner time for you, Vincent. It was a pleasure speaking with you. It was fantastic having you here. Do you have any final words for us?
Yeah, I think it's this initiative of AMPT is very nice. It's a transfrontier, transborder. There is the need of united together to get solutions. And I think that the science and advanced material can be a way to achieve better things and to alleviate the consequence of the pandemics is very nice. And in France, we do cherish the idea of science can be for the good of humanity. So this is something I like to support.
We're very lucky and very happy to have you on board. Again, I thank you for your time and have a great dinner.
Thank you for accepting us.
Thank you.